All right, Aaron, is everyone in? Do we know?
Yes, I think we should be good to start going through at least the notices.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for attending the MOU committee meeting. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. After roll call, board members may mute and unmute themselves. Always remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. Find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom or the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on participants. If you are on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact Emma McGuire via the chat box at emaguire@ctps.org or phone at 857-702-3681. Accessibility statement. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, please contact Emma McGuire again, MPO staff at emaguire@ctps.org or 857-702-3681. All right. Today's agenda, introductions. If everyone wants to, or do you want to call the roll, Erin?
Happy to. Intercore Committee.
Tom Bent, City Assemblable, Intercore.
MBTA Advisory Board.
Brian Kane here. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Metro West Regional Collaborative.
Dennis Giambetti, representing Metro West.
MassDOT. MAPC. Our other MassDOT seat. I do see John Romano. I'm not sure if you're able to unmute yourself. Okay. RTAC.
Leonard Diggins, Advisory Council here.
City of Boston.
Jen Rowe with the City of Boston and Mayor Michelle Wu.
Thank you. And the town of Brookline.
Mike Sandman, Brookline Select Board.
Thank you. That calls the roll.
All right, great. Thanks, Erin. Are there any public comments? Okay, hearing none. If anybody from the public wants to make a comment during the meeting, just please raise your hand and we'll get to you as soon as we can. Item number 3 is the approval of the this meeting summary. Who's going to take that? You, David, or?
I think Jen Rowe has raised her hand to.
I was going to make a motion to approve the meeting summary.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Gonna jump in with a roll call here, Mr. Chair. Yeah. Unfortunately. Tom Bent.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you. Brian Kane.
Yes.
Dennis Giambetti.
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Thank you. Derek Cravat.
Derek Cravat, yes.
Thank you. Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, yes.
Thank you. John Romano. Will return. Len Diggins.
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe.
Jen Rowe, yes.
And Mike Sandman.
Mike Sandman, yes.
Thank you. And returning to John Romano. All right, thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. Number 4, follow-up items from the previous meeting. Abby and Erin.
Hello, good afternoon. So I am here to discuss a few follow-up items that were requested at our last meeting. We're going to be talking about two items. The first is the 2020 population of the subregions, and the second is our federal funding distributions by subregion as well. So beginning with this graphic, this slide will show the population of subregions using data from the 2020 census. Both maps represent the population of each subregion, where darker shades of blue indicate a larger population. On the left is a map that shows the population of the Inner Core Committee that includes the population of Boston within the count. And then on the right is a map that separates out the Boston population from the Inner Core Committee. Key takeaways here are that the largest population is the Inner Core Committee, including Boston. It has about 1.8 million people, whereas when you separate out those two populations, the Inner Core Committee has just over 1 million. Boston has just under 600, or just over 600,000. So I will pause here just for a moment in case we want to have further discussion about populations.
All right, does anybody want to discuss any of this piece that Aaron's just done?
Are all subregions created equally and have the same votes and all that good stuff?
That is a much larger question that has a lot of implications and nuance involved with it. I'm not sure if Tegan had any further comments.
Well, who created
Yeah.
these and by what authority are they created? Are they in statute anywhere?
Subregions themselves.
Eric's got his hands up, I think.
Yeah, I can speak to this. So these are the MAPC subregions, and MAPC, our council, essentially created these subregions, and I don't know when they were first established. I know that over time they have sort of changed slightly, and we've also allowed some members to sort of be like members of both subregion, although I think we've said that like when you're voting like for MPO seats, you have to like kind of choose one. Like you can't vote in like both. The Boston MPO then has adopted MAPC's like subregions as part of the public engagement. And then we obviously had like adopted them as part of the MOU, like the first reversion of the MOU for the voting, and then we've codified that as part of like the whole MOU. So it's really come from MAPC originally and sort of been adopted by the MPO.
And then in answer to I think the question, are they all treated equally? I'm not totally sure what you meant, but if what you meant is in terms of voting, they are treated equally, meaning each subregion has one seat on the board. So that's in that sense, not proportional, not equitable, nothing like that, just but equal. Each subregion, each of the 8 has a single seat.
Okay. This just seems woefully out of whack to me and not representative of how people organize themselves. But it is what it is, so okay. I also don't like the fact that the US Senate has 2 votes per state and lots of states have more population than others. So is what it is.
Yeah. I think I had asked for this information, so I appreciate staff providing it. I did do a little rerun of the analysis that Marcos Luna had done on like how representative of the population as a whole the membership is, and I think I mean I can share that with the group if people would like. I think what it showed was that if you count the 4 at-large seats that are currently held by the Inner Core as also kind of Inner Core seats, the representation across the subregions is actually not too off. I think if anything, Boston is a little bit underrepresented, just keeping Boston separate. If you don't include those at-large seats, then the Inner Core is actually quite severely underrepresented and Boston is adequately represented. So just happy to share the results of that later, but just as a kind of for information purposes.
All right, anybody else have any questions on this piece?
Yeah, okay.
Seeing,
I just, no, sorry, go ahead. I'm mumbling to
Yeah.
myself, sorry.
okay, yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
All right, awesome. So the next piece that we were asked to follow up on was how subregional funding is distributed in practice. So what I have prepared for us is a graph that is looking at, on top, it's all federal funding that has been spent in the region from federal fiscal years 2011 to 2028. The top bar is that, and then we have the percent of population within the subregions, followed by the percent of target funding that is spent during the same time period. So the blue bar is all federal funding, inclusive of state, and then the green bar is what the MPO board has direct discretion over. So beginning by looking at TRIC, they have 8% of the population, about 8% of all federal funding, and about 13% of target funding. And then just running through all of these numbers, North Shore Planning Council has 6% of the population, 8% of federal funding, 8% of target funding. South Shore Coalition has 7% of the population, 3% of federal funding, 5% of target. North Shore has 9% of the population, 9% of federal, 8% of our target. SWAP has 5% of the population, 7% of federal funding, and 4% of target funding. Metro West, 7% of the population, 7% of federal funding, 11% of target. Magic had 5% of the population, 4% of all federal funding, and 7% of our target funding. And then finally, the inner core had 53% of the population, 52% of all federal funding, and then 44% of our regional target funding. And again, I will stop here for any sort of discussions.
Okay, anybody have any questions or want to bring up anything with this chart? I mean, oh, go ahead. Wasn't sure who that was. Leonard.
Yep. So I would just say, I mean, both of these charts are interesting to me, but they are just one piece of data, and they need to fit into a much larger context before we start drawing any kind of conclusions. I mean, for instance, with the federal funding, with the funding, it's like, well, what are the projects? What regions are they serving? Are they connecting, these sub-regions to Boston? Or are they being internal? So that's all has to be part of the discussion before I think we start drawing any kind of conclusions. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? All right, seeing none. Continue, Aaron.
Sorry. Can I was having trouble raising my hand. Can I just answer a quick question on it?
Sure, go ahead.
It was the that analysis, was it for projects that span multiple years? Is this showing the total cost of projects programmed, or is it just the amount within 2011 to 2028?
Can you rephrase that just a bit?
Yeah, like where the percentages of regional target, for example, is it showing the total amount of the project that's within a given region or sub-region? Or is it like the amount that's programmed? Like Rutherford, for example, I think goes out to 2032, and the total cost spreads over 5 or 6 years. Is the analysis looking at the total cost of that project, or is it just the amount that's programmed through 2028?
Just through 2028. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that's what I thought, but thank you for confirming. Thanks.
Okay, anybody else? I'm seeing none. I'd continue. Okay, well, I'm sorry. Action items on, we're going to talk about the RTA representation.
Thank you.
Yep, go ahead, David.
Thank you so much. So carrying on with the couple of previous MOU committee meetings, if we go to the next slide, we're going to start off with Are there any remaining outstanding questions for the Metro West RTA and the Cape Ann Transportation Authority related to representation? If any committee members have questions, we can take them, and there are also members present from both of these organizations to respond, and then we can go from there and kind of move down the list here. So I'll pause there.
Okay, does anyone have any questions or want to ask either of the RTAs any other questions that we haven't already asked at the previous meeting? Okay, I see Eric.
Yeah, I really apologize, and I think I missed the last meeting. Has the question been answered of how the seat would be shared?
Yes, and correct me if I'm wrong, but basically it's going to be shared, by MWRTA and CADA with alternating terms. So there'd be so each one of them would pick a 2-year term and the other one would be their alternate. So it'd be 2-year terms, and then whoever isn't in the seat would be the alternate, and then it would switch back 2 years later.
Okay, so they would negotiate them between themselves on the timing of that.
Yeah. Yeah, who would basically go first, and then.
Thank you. One thing, I know we just had this conversation about kind of like representation and from the region, and clearly looking at this, I think there's sort of some question to say, like, is the inner core Boston sort of not fully represented here? I'm supportive of this vote of adding this RTA seat, but I think it would be good if we said somewhere that we will, and I don't know what the cycle is for reevaluating like the MOU, but like reevaluating this and just seeing like, is this vote adding this member to is it sort of somehow changing the dynamic of the outcomes of the MPO, and reevaluating it in this committee on some cycle. I know there is, and I'm looking to staff here, I know baked into the MOU, we talk about revisiting it, and I forget what that is. I don't think it's annually. Is it every couple of years? Erin, do you know the answer?
Yes, so at the moment in our currently active MOU, we are set for an annual review. In the staff proposed changes, we have it set to 4 years following a certification review.
I think that makes sense, and I think we could say something, if we don't already, like reviewing MPO membership is one thing that will be reviewed.
Len.
Yeah, so a question for Eric. Recalling that you said you don't know how the subregions were created by MAPC?
I don't, I mean, I could probably talk to the elder statesman of MAPC, Martin Pillsbury, who's been with MAPC since I think 1982, and he would probably know exactly. I don't have a document, and I don't think there's a document that exists that describes like when the first iteration of the subregions were established.
Right.
They definitely have changed over the decades, based on, I think, a combination of just demographics and also just like kind of what made sense from an MAPC, I think, staff capacity standpoint. If that was something you were interested in, like learning more about, I could try to see if like a memo could be produced that would describe that.
I mean, I'm curious. I mean, and I think it'd be good if we could, have some kind of historical document, just because this question will come up again. I mean, so we have that document, then it'll be like, here's what we, gathered together, at least in 2024. I'm fine with me looking at the components. I think any evaluation, of the distribution, of seats, versus the population, is a big undertaking. And by that, I mean, it's like, I think in order to get any kind of data that we would feel confident in, I think you'd have to probably look at 50 years of data, because it's just so many factors going into it. But I'm all for undertaking that, and in doing that, we'll, I think, look at a lot of components, that we want to take into consideration as a board when you deciding on plans, projects. But it's not something I think that we have any reliable conclusion, if we did the analysis right now based on the projects that we selected. That's it. Thank you.
Brian, in the chat, you say the MAPC subregion founding document is with the original MOU?
Yeah, they're both lost.
They're what?
They're both lost.
Oh, with the original. Got it. Okay, I get your joke. Yeah, along with the MARPA formula.
But are they lost?
Yes,
Are they
exactly. Yes.
They're on a floppy disk somewhere.
Yeah.
Hidden in
Probably. Maybe a tape drive. All right. Yeah, Jen, for everyone too, if you haven't looked in the chat, Jen's also put in what she believes the text of the MOU is at the moment, which is basically says every 4 years following the federal certification review process or at the discretion of the majority vote of board members, the memorandum of understanding shall be reviewed in full and modified as needed. Revisions to this memorandum of understanding shall be discussed in committee format at the discretion of the MPO board, but revisions shall be reviewed by the full MPO board and approved with a majority vote. So Jen, thank you for that.
No problem.
Any other comments on this? Or Eric, with what you had said, is that something that you want to put into a motion so that, it would be part of our recommendation?
Sure. I will make a motion. The committee vote, I'm reading this, I just want to get this right. Make a motion to recommend adding one permanent voting board seat shared by Metro West RTA and CADA with alternating terms of 2 years with the ability for one entity to serve as the other's alternate.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
Leonard Diggins is happy to second it.
Okay, with that second, any other discussion? Dennis, let's see, Dennis Giambetti.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a comment that I do support this. I think it does make sense to add the RTAs, and I also think Eric's right that we should review periodically the membership of that. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, Jen Rowe.
Yeah, thanks. I'm also in favor of approving this, and I was going to put in the chat suggested language for the MOU about kind of revisiting the question of membership. So I'll do that and let you all read it.
Thank you. All right, so we believe we got, do we get a second? I believe we did, right?
Yes.
All right, so and Leonard, was your hand still up, or is that from just before?
My hand's not up.
Okay,
but I did second it. No,
Okay.
it was just a second, so it wasn't a question. So I think that's what confuses things. So
All right.
yeah,
Nope,
thank you.
Then, all in favor, roll call vote, Jen?
Tom Bent,
Yes.
Brian Kane,
Yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Okay, I will call you
Yes.
back in 45. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Derek Cravat,
Yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
John Romano, Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
and Mike Sandman.
Mike Sandman, yes.
Thank you. That motion carries, Mr. Chair.
All right, great, thank you. Next is a discussion on the board education. And is that David?
Thank you. Just going to, if we could go back one slide, just wrap up the tail end of that, which is the next steps, the MOU update
sorry.
committee that we have. No worries at all. We'll bring this recommendation to not tomorrow's MPO board meeting, but the subsequent in-person / hybrid March 21st MPO board meeting as an agenda item to share, I believe. And then any vote that is then discussed or passed within the full board will go into effect after the November 2024 meeting. And just for clarity, sharing that with the committee. Then let's go to the board education discussion section. Here, if we go to the next slide, simply want to open it up to the committee for discussion, but let me set some context here. There in the ad hoc committee was mentioned and recommendation to include within the updated MOU language that sets the expectations for education, but also any commitments that would be made. So that will be high level language that is included, but there was, I believe, interest expressed in a few different things, including opportunities for peer exchange to attend AMPO, for example, and perhaps other conferences. And there's been some, I guess, discussions around are there, training resources that new members, for example, should take. And with that, I guess that as a backdrop, this slide does two things. One is, sharing that we've seen examples of other MPOs outside of state that invest money and capacity into training, as well as facilitating peer exchange opportunities for board members. And then the second thing is, what are some examples and avenues of doing this? Starting from left to right, online, there's National Highway Institute that has modules. And then AMPO is, I think, revising training modules. The bottom row that we have here, just kind of rough order of magnitude dollar signs, could invite subject matter specialists to a board meeting, for a topic that is timely or relevant for the region, or conversely attend a conference. So some examples listed there. And then peer exchange could take place in the form of similar to the UCA sessions that we had in the past before the pandemic, an online exchange, or inviting or flying over to the MPO regions, pure MPO regions. And then other, that would be, more of the self-learning type of nature. And so I guess with that context, the question here is, are there any particular elements here that you want to draw the board's attention to or recommend, to do more of? Or are there additional topics? And Tegan, if you want to chime in, or others around, framing this in terms of most of these have kind of a dollar implication to it as well. And so just kind of keeping that in mind. And I'll pause. I think Dennis has his hand up, but I will turn back to the chair.
Yep.
Tom.
Dennis?
That was by mistake, sorry.
Okay. So actually, David, to be clear, so anything that would have money attached to it, that would come out of our operating funds now, right? As far as what's available.
I will defer to Tegan.
Yeah, so to be specific, I think the funding source that this would typically come out of is the PL funds, which is the kind of the biggest revenue stream, the funding revenue stream that comes to the staff of the MPO to carry out the 3C process. So there is a trade-off there, you know, in terms of how those funds are spent. There are ways in which we can talk about, you know, that trade-off. There are also some years where we haven't used all of the PL funds that have been available to us, and MassDOT has recently released guidance on using previously deobligated PL funds. So there's also a chance to be sort of opportunistic when there's enough funding versus when, you know, versus having a trade-off between staff time and perhaps some of these opportunities. So there's a couple different ways we could talk about it, but there is a trade-off embedded in there.
Thank you, Ted. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So whereas I'm all fine with including being education as part of the MOU, and I wouldn't be inclined to be specific about how we go about educating our members in the MOU any more than I would be inclined to specify which criteria we use to create projects, through the MOU, and I'll just offer this. I'll offer the advisory council to as a place where you could invite people with the purpose of educating the board. So just I know we're going to talk about the advisory council and its role in the MOU later on, but this might be a place where we could do it. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Len. Anyone else? Eric.
I mean, I think there is also the potential, I think, to apply, I think, for some funding. I think there are some federal highway or transit programs where you could apply, particularly for like peer exchanges or attending like federal highway sponsored events. Many years ago, I think it was Transportation for America. They had like proposed some funding, and we did this thing where there were several MPOs, staff and board members participated in some exchange with other MPOs. Ann McGann participated in that. Tom from the city of Boston participated in that. I was a part of that. There was even some external stakeholders, I think, who participated too. That was completely funded by that group. But I think there's also opportunities to like apply for things, not just be opportunistic in what comes our way. I think what would be helpful, though, probably to staff, because someone would have to initiate that, is like, what are the things that people are interested in? Is it learning about how other MPOs work? Are there specific, topics around like project, selection or innovative things? But my sense is there are opportunities out there.
Thanks, Eric. Just, chime in for a second. I think too, we're looking at, different levels of this, like, because one of the questions would be, somebody comes on the MPO as a new member. Should there be something that they're required to attend? Because typically I remember decades ago when I went on, it was recommended, the staff did a one-day MPO 101, which was great because it kind of gave me a better idea of what the MPO is doing. And then as part of the homework that Aaron and some others have given us over the past year, and with the ad hoc committee, and then with this committee, was modules from NHI that I took. It was 3 hours. Get a nice certificate at the end of it, and but for me it was a great refresher, and I could see that being a really good course for somebody new to the MPO. So I think there's a couple of questions, and that was free. It didn't cost us anything. So I think there might be a couple of avenues that we could go on education on something that should a new member, should there be a requirement that they at least do something, and then later on, as far as trying to grow our awareness as to what other MPOs are doing out there, attending an event or inviting a guest or a peer exchange would be beneficial also. Jen.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I guess I could see value to all of these different types of kind of education or peer exchange opportunities. I'm wondering, I agree with Len that probably like being prescriptive about the type might not be wise in the MOU. But so I'm wondering if we could come up with some sort of a statement that's more like the MPO shall endeavor to provide a range of different educational opportunities to its members, and maybe with, that, and be a little bit more prescriptive in that their new members, there should be some sort of new member orientation, and that maybe also there's, I don't know what cadence this would make sense, but I'm thinking of the city, we have to do all these like annual security, whatever, ethics
Yep.
things. And maybe like there's nothing quite like that, but perhaps there's a annual or biannual briefing on changes to the federal guidance that maybe we should know about as board members, something like that.
Thanks, Jen. Anyone else? All right, Derek.
Oh, yes, thank you. I'll find you in a second. Yeah, I just want to say I agree with what everyone's been saying. And yeah, Jen, to your point, I think like when things change, like there's a new federal bill on infrastructure like we had recently, like that's, a great opportunity to start educating. And Eric, I think you mentioned like kind of polling members to see what they might think is interesting. I just wanted to say at MassDOT, we're doing a lot of thinking right now about outreach for our capital investment plan and how we might be able to improve that and talk to folks about like getting a project from start to finish. What's the process to initiate it? How does program managers at MassDOT decide what to fund in the statewide lists, and how to advance a project through development? So if there's opportunities to collaborate on that and think about, if they're interested in sort of the federal process versus like just how to get a project through it and what MassDOT does, I'm happy to kind of help coordinate with that as well. And curious to see how board members react to, just framing it maybe that way as like as an option, right? It's like, are you interested in the federal side, the process piece, sort of like the state process and those things? I think could be interesting to see how they rate certain aspects of the process with respect to level of interest in learning. So that's all. And yeah, Sam, I've done the NHI courses as well, and they're great and really helpful overviews of the process. So I also second that. But thank you.
Yeah, it was great as far as helping remind me all the different abbreviations that that go on. There's a lot of them. I'll take them.
Yeah, just also in responses to folks' comments around, not being overly prescriptive in the MOU. I absolutely agree. And I think that we could, in parallel to these MOU updates, we are kind of tracking and thinking about what it might make sense to do in parallel with the operations plan. And so a few more details might fit better in the operations plan. So if we can kind of take what we're hearing here, propose something more general about the intent in the MOU, and then also work on some language that might be supportive in the operations plan, then we can kind of tackle it in a couple different ways without being overly prescriptive. I do think that it would be helpful for us as staff to be able to work with you all as board members if you feel strongly about any one of these areas that do have a more significant investment or cost associated with them. For example, attending, an AMPO conference, or having things like peer exchanges that would take like, us putting work into identifying and applying. It would be helpful to know the leanings of you all as board members, because every now and then a comment comes up in a board meeting, but there's not as much of an organized conversation about what could we benefit most from, as a group of MPO members. And I might offer also just some opinions of my own in there. For example, if you're like, oh, I really want to do like some really good peer exchanges, like I might offer, well, perhaps it can be really hard to organize a good peer exchange. And it's also really important to sort of not be opportunistic about peer exchanges, but actually identify the right groups to do peer exchanges with. And so if that were what you're interested in, and I'm not saying you are, it might be better first to do some level of engagement in like an AMPO, some kind of AMPO events to learn about other peer MPOs in a more generalized way before then deciding to do a deep dive into like a peer exchange, right? So there's a lot of nuances to your point about not being overly prescriptive. There's a lot of nuances as to how this can play out. So getting a sense for where you think you know, this board would really benefit most, would help us start to think through some strategies we could work to advance with you all.
Great, thank you, Tegan. Yeah, I just, go ahead, Jen.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to put in my own preference, I think, towards like being able to send a contingent to AMPO. I really get a lot of value out of going to conferences, but I think especially with peers, so that you can have that kind of conversation about how this applies, and maybe even like present back to the remainder of the board or something to that extent.
Yep, I'd put my 2 cents in that too. I know over the years, I was always surprised that the MPO never sent anybody to a national conference like that. And I think I've said this before when I was chair of the Housing Authority here in Somerville. Some of the best ideas we got and implemented came from the national organization events where we were able to and a lot of it was having that peer exchange during the meetings, sitting down with the Chicago Housing Authority to find out what they were doing. And, I remember the state at the time when we were asking, to build some new housing, said, well, think out of the box. And we did. And then when we came back, they actually ended up allowing us to do, I think it was the first state funded housing in 25 years in Somerville. So you can get some great ideas out of those national conferences. Len.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate, please seriously consider integrating the advisory council into these educational, endeavors. As I said, you can have people come to our meetings, presenters, but also have new members come to our meetings and maybe bring some other people from their region, so that it can not only be an educational opportunity, but also a long-term training opportunity. But as I said, we'll be talking about the advisory council more, but I spit this out now because I know people are going to be working on some ideas, to bring before the MOU, the MUC, in future conversations. So I just want to say that that's something I feel strongly about. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Lynn. Anybody else on this? Okay, seeing none. Going to ask staff, do you have enough to come back to us with something? Not sure. David?
Yes. Let's see. So I had taken notes from preferences that were expressed in terms of wanting to send contingents to AMPO. But I guess earlier, to sum up, the consensus seems as though we're not baking in a very prescriptive language into the MOU, but rather expressing intent and then articulating perhaps finer things optionally within the operations plan as it makes sense. And so that has been kind of the main takeaway from this, as well as, some of the opinions that were shared around opportunistic chances, but also thinking down the road in terms of funding opportunities to apply. And for example, the federal highway that Eric had shared in past examples. So I think it was more takeaways, or rather summaries of the discussion, rather than anything to take away and bring back, unless I'm mistaken. So I'll pass it back. I know folks have hands up, so I'll pass it back to the chair.
All right, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I was just going to suggest that anytime there's an AMPO conference in Hawaii, I would highly suggest that you be selected to attend.
No, sorry, the chair of the MOU committee gets that one. Sorry.
It's in Salt Lake City, I think, this year, guys. Sorry.
That's why I said Hawaii.
Brian, it's all set. You can go. Jen, go ahead.
So, maybe offer a couple thoughts or suggestions that I think it might be interesting to have some cadence with which staff maybe send out a little survey about kind of interest in different types of opportunities. And just like there's a, we're a subset of the board, and to get a larger sample there, and also maybe like I think there's probably opportunities out there that we're not, I'm sure, taking advantage of, and so maybe like I know I was at first going to suggest some sort of a little forum where we could all like share things that we're reading that are interesting, and then I'm like, open meeting law. So perhaps it needs to be we send things to staff and staff send stuff out.
Thanks. Is that something, that's, find that interesting. Would staff be able to send out a survey? And Jen, I'm going to ask you, would that be just to the MOU committee, or would you be looking at that to the full board? Just to get thoughts on.
I think we can probably, the degree of the level at which we're going to express this in the MOU, I think is fine. I don't think we need to send a survey out to the board for that. It was just more as kind of a regular thing, whether it's in the operations plan or not, just that getting a sense for what folks are interested learning about, whether it's subject matter expertise coming in or just like gaps in knowledge, and I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, no, my thought was to MOU, but I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page. David, your thoughts on that? Well, I'm sorry, Len, go ahead.
I did not mean that other emoji, whatever it is. I was trying to raise my hand.
I was going to ask you, Len, is that something new or what?
I don't know. Can't even really make out what it was. I don't know if it was. I think they were all positive on Zoom, so hopefully it's not inappropriate though. So I guess I lost. I wasn't quite clear on Jen's point about the survey. This would be a one-time survey.
I guess I was thinking this could be a regularly occurring survey, just to again, if we're building into the MOU that staff, or that we want to offer board members some type of learning opportunities, that maybe a survey every so often to understand what board members feel like they want to learn about, and kind of what ways might be work best for them to do the learning.
Right. Well, almost by definition, though, that'd have to be by the board, though, right? Because this committee's going away, right? Okay. All right. Just making sure I understood that. Okay. All right. All right. Thanks.
So just taking from that, and taking gets you next is but as opportunities come up, staff would then, basically, it wouldn't really be a survey. It would be more of, hey, this new opportunity from AMPO just came up for, director training, or NHI is a new training piece, or whatever, so I would think, and I think you've done that in the past, you've let us know when, there's a training or something available, so I do remember that from previous MPO meetings. Tegan.
Yeah, I think we have done that before. And again, we're taking a lot of notes, and we'll process and think about how we try to accomplish some of these things after the meeting. I'll also offer that, even with this committee expiring at some point, that's sounded more serious than it needed to. The fact that it's a temporary committee. I would also just add, kind of going back to what Len said, I think it's possible we can also occasionally pull, RTAC members as well, or people going to RTAC to see what they're talking about and what they're interested in, as well as potentially pull. It could be a good space, something to bring up occasionally with the UPWP committee as well, because again, if it's something like, sending, if it is like sending a board member a year or 2 board members a year to AMPO, that has a cost associated with it that would be impacted by the PL funds, right? And so with the UPWP committee approving the work plan and the budget with the work plan, there are a couple of different forums we could think to sort of continue to generate ideas and interest and kind of push information out. So I think we just kind of have to think about and process some of these ideas and try to put together like a framework that might make sense to start with.
Great, thank you. All right, any other discussion on this? All right, seeing none. Members items is number 7. Do we, any members have any items they want to bring up? Seeing none. David, the next meeting?
Yes, I'm gonna walk us through if we have the slides for the work planning. And so here, what we could do optionally tomorrow during the MPO is within the chair report, just a heads up that I recommend, or heads up that an agenda item to discuss the RTA representation is coming through for March 21. Just if we want to do an early kind of signal. If not, March 21 will be the one where we add an agenda item there with some time for discussion. March 20th is a committee meeting. And so I think we'll begin initiating the advisory council role module as a part of the MOU committee. And I believe within the month of March, there's going to be some early kind of context setting before April, in which there's going to be more within our tech around some of the language that is presented. And so I think that is phased out. We're just kind of signaling that this module is considered to kind of kick off within the month of March. And then we're looking at April 3rd. Could potentially have an interim update on the, or actually that might be a little bit too early. So let's table that one. We might have an update. We'll be aiming for an update on public engagement. And I think board education discussion is, a lot of that is had today. And so with that, I think we can go to the next slide, which kind of shows us where we are now compared to the work plan. So advisory council role, again, that's slowly ramping up. Fiduciary agreements, that's ongoing in the background as well. RTA roles, we're making good progress. And then the two other modules are also on the work plan as well. And so just wanted to give you a snapshot of that.
Thank you. Len?
A question about the RTA roles. I mean, what else are we, do you have discussed about the RTA roles? I mean, now that hopefully our colleagues on the board will approve your membership. That's it.
Yeah, no. Oh, okay, gotcha. I don't think we had, I think, budgeted time in case there was a lot of back and forth. And so with that, I think we likely will have a more accelerated timeline, in which case the disclaimer at the top always holds. Proposed work plan is subject to change, and we can move up some of the other modules and work on those.
No problem. I just assumed I had missed something, so that's it. Well, thanks.
Thank you. That wraps up the work plan update, and then the next two meetings are, let me just have a look, going to be March the 20th and then April the 3rd. Yep. And just as a reminder, unrelated to the committee, but just as a reminder that the MPO meetings, tomorrow is virtual, but March the 21st and April the 4th are going to be in-person / hybrid. Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. If there's nothing else, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Jen? Okay. All in favor?
Yes.
Hi.
All right.
I'm shocked that this meeting is over so soon.